Hello, this is Mr. Bucon, and this is a little slideshow I've made for you about how to do an effective rhetorical analysis. Doing it right while finding your own voice. It's important to remember that as you're doing this, there are guidelines for doing a successful one that I would encourage you to follow, but those are not written in stone. I think the ultimate goal is to remember that you are demonstrating your ability to analyze a selection that you have read and then write about what you have read and how that author is communicating his or her ideas to an audience and whether or not that author is being effective. The first thing to make sure that you do is make sure that you read the selection as carefully as possible. And these are some of the points that we have been using in class throughout the year that you want to remember as you are reading each selection. First of all, make sure that you're looking at rhetorical appeals. These could be ethos, which is how does the author develop his or her credibility. Remember that there's an automatic ethos which comes with the author depending on his or her credentials. But also you want to make sure that you are looking at how the author appeals to the audience using logic and reason. Remember that everyone is trying to persuade the audience to think differently, to look at the world differently, to make changes when necessary. And so using logic and reason is one way of doing that, and that is considered a rhetorical appeal. Another appeal that many authors use is appealing to people's emotions. Selections that strictly appeal to people's emotions are not always successful simply because we can't always predict what an audience is going to think or feel. But there is a certain level of emotional appeal that is necessary in order to convince people to change their thoughts or to accept a different course of action. Another aspect of the selection that you can examine is exactly who the speaker is. What does the selection reveal to us about the speaker? Who is he? Who is she? Where are they from? What values does the speaker have that are evident in the text? Those are actually things that you can bring out in a rhetorical analysis because that's part of what an author is doing. It's revealing part of what he or she believes to be true, to what he or she believes to be values. Another aspect of your text preparation and annotation is looking at how the entire selection is organized. What role does the first paragraph have in the selection? How does the second paragraph build on what the first paragraph is doing? What is the purpose of this section in the text? That'll allow you to look at larger portions of the text a little more individually as opposed to looking at the whole selection. So break it down into smaller parts. What works best for you. I typically like to look at it maybe 2 to 3 sections, but again, you can look at this however you want to look at it. Next is the author's writing style. What are the word choices the person is using? What types of sentences is a person using? Are they mixing short sentences with longer sentences? Is the vocabulary elevated, or are they using a simpler vocabulary to communicate to the audience? That's all part of the writer's style. Rhetorical devices and imagery. While AP is not real big on identifying every single device that's in a selection, it's actually better to explain what you think the author is doing than to be concerned about identifying each particular device. Also pay attention to the author's use of imagery. All these devices and imagery serve a purpose. Why is the author choosing to use a metaphor? Why is the author choosing to use an allusion to another selection or uh, work? What purpose does this imagery serve in the actual text? It's not just that the author is just using that, they're using it for a reason. And it's up to you to decide how the author is using it and whether or not it's effective. And finally, probably the most important one is, what exactly is the overarching theme? What's the message that the author is attempting to convey to his or her audience? Once an audience hears the speech or reads a letter or reads a speech or a passage from an essay, what does the author want his or her audience to take with them? Um, and as you're looking at the theme, also pay very close attention to the tone. Avoiding such words as it's a happy tone or a sad tone. Take a look at your strong verb sheet. That will give you a list of different tone words. Be very cognizant of the words that you choose to describe what the author is doing, because that will help you to make a more successful rhetorical analysis. Once you're finished with the analysis itself, you can go ahead and start deciding how you want to organize your actual rhetorical analysis of the selection. I'm going to give you two examples and an example to go along with each one of those. The best way that I have found, and this takes a great deal of skill and a great deal of confidence as a writer, that is to examine these sections sequentially. What does the author do at the very beginning in order to convey his or her ideas? What does the author do towards the end? If you can organize by sections of the selection, that will help you actually organize your essay as you write it. This will help you to demonstrate understanding of the different parts of the essay. It will also allow you to have closer examination of the parts. For example, if an author begins a selection by describing a certain setting or certain aspect of his or her life, you know that you can go deeper into that and say, well, how does the author describe this setting or his or her life? And it allows you to be more specific and to look at the devices that the author is using in order to do that and whether or not they are effective. And it definitely helps you as a writer, particularly on the AP exam, if you work through sequentially. When you jump around from point to point at developing your essay, you may not pick up everything that you need to pick up. But if you go through structurally from the beginning until the end, you'll have a stronger essay. Let me give you a quick example of that. This is a claim that you would possibly have at the beginning of one of your body paragraphs. Throughout the paragraphs at the outset of the selection, the author describes, what's the author describing, in order to convey what to the audience, in order to demonstrate what. And that's a good frame sentence for you to use. And clearly I'd like you to develop your own style with this and move away from the frame sentence that I provided here. That's a good way to get started. Another organizational style. This one is effective. I prefer the sectional sequential style, but you can actually be very effective in a rhetorical analysis just simply by relying on the author's use of rhetorical appeals. This also will help you to organize sections based on the types of appeals. It helps you to focus on the reasons for using the rhetorical appeals and how it affects the audiences. If you struggle with rhetorical analysis, this kind of forces you into it, because you just can't say, well, the author uses logic and reason here, and the author uses appeals to emotion here. You have to explain why they're using that and how it could possibly affect the audience, and whether or not that's an effective way of conveying his or her ideas. It also allows for a closer examination of parts. If you do it that way, you can pick out some good examples of how the author is doing that. And as always, I would definitely work through sequentially. That means going from the beginning of the essay to the end. So if you decide to focus on logic and reason initially in one of your body paragraphs, throughout starting at the beginning towards the end, what are some ways in which the author uses logic and reason throughout the entire essay? It's not good enough just to give one example. You have to give multiple examples of that. I'm going to give you an example of a claim that you would use in the body. Throughout the selection, the author uses appeals to logic and reason in order to demonstrate what? In order to convey what to the audience? That's for you to fill in. And again, this is a frame sentence. I'd encourage you to develop your own style from this. Once you've decided on what organizational style that you want to use, I want you to create an outline of your actual rhetorical analysis until we really get into the habit of doing this almost instinctually. So what I need you to do is, on a piece of loose leaf paper, I'm going to ask you to copy what I have up there at the very beginning, which says opening. Remember, this is what we have talked about before, the what, how, and so what format, but I've added a couple other questions to this, and maybe this will help you do that. So up at the top of your loose leaf paper, you will write opening, colon, what is the selection about? Why is the author writing this? Who is the audience? And capitalize the what, why, and who. This will help you hopefully remember that that's what you have to include in there and help this become more instinctual for you. So when you do the outline, right after that opening statement there, I'd just like you to write a Roman numeral 1 and then write soapstone. And then underneath that, just put A, B, C, D, E, F. It's soapstone. Remember, it's speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, and tone. And just list the items there. I'm not worried about those being incomplete sentences right now. Just list all 6 of those, and you're good to go. After that, I do want you to write the thesis, and I'd like you to write this out on your outline at this time. There are 3 parts to it. Remember, each one of these needs to be linked together. You have to include the author. I like to include the author's name. Now be careful about including just using the author's first name. You want to make sure that we're keeping this as formal as possible. Next, you want to mention the rhetorical strategies that the author is using. And this could be a time when you could actually put in the items that you're going to mention in your organization of your rhetorical analysis, the things that you plan to discuss. So the author uses these rhetorical appeals in order to convey this purpose or overarching theme. Remember that the opening is where you're really capturing the reader's attention and demonstrating whether or not you truly understand what the author is saying. So again, it would be Roman numeral 1, then A, B, C, D, E, F, and then Roman numeral 2, thesis, and just put all like the A, B, C, don't list them there. I'd rather you write the thesis as a sentence right beside number 2. Next is the body, and right after you're done with the opening, I would like you to write this down as well. Body, how does the author convey his or her ideas? How does it connect with the audience? Those are questions that you need to answer within the body of your essay. This can be anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 paragraphs. Again, this is entirely up to you depending on how you want to organize it. I would encourage 2 to 3 paragraphs, but if you do it differently depending on how your organization is set up, it can be done either way. I'm going to give you a little model now of the outline. You will restart the Roman numerals, so you have 1, and then you'll have the claim. And I'm going to put a model here for you. Throughout the paragraphs, at the outset of the selection, the author describes blank in order to blank. Again, frame sentence. And then the A and B underneath each one are going to be similar. Okay. Letter A is a specific example that the author uses. Number 1 will be an evaluative explanation of use. Evaluative meaning, you should be using words like successfully to convey whether or not the author is doing a good job on this. Most of the selections you're going to receive, the author is doing a good job. It's rare that you're going to receive, I can't imagine if you would receive a selection where the author is doing a poor job. So A is a specific example, and then it's an evaluative explanation of the use. How is the author using that? And then number 2 is an evaluative explanation of the effect on the audience. These are just things that you want to say. I don't want to make this out to be A is a sentence, 1 is a sentence, 2 is a sentence, and then when you have a second example, B is a sentence, and then 1 is a sentence, and 2 is a sentence. That's not what this is. This is just organizing your ideas. You will take this outline and develop this into your own specific essay in your own style. So this is just getting your ideas together for this. Now let me give you an example. Roman numeral 1, throughout the paragraphs at the outset of the selection, the author describes his feelings related to being, quote, invisible in order to convey a sense of loneliness and separation to the audience. Notice that I used the word invisible there, and I put that in quotation marks because that's an actual word that the author is using. My A, Ellison compares this isolation to being at a circus sideshow with mirrors of hard, distorting glass around him. Notice that I underlined and put in red the strong verb that I'm using. I didn't just put down the author writes, the author says, but the author compares this isolation to being at a, quote, circus sideshow, end quote, with, quote, mirrors of hard, distorting glass, end quote, around him. That's taking small bits of text and putting it within my words. To support that, I could write, this comparison effectively shows how no one in society sees him for who he is. Number 2, the author's imagery successfully conveys to the audience this isolation. Again, conveys, compares. I'm demonstrating what I'm doing there. Now, clearly, when I'm writing this out, I am going to do this so that it is not a rigid organizational tool. I would want to write this in such a way where I'm demonstrating my creative ability as a writer as well. The closing. And again, once you do the body, so what does it all mean? So how effective is the author? These are just 2 Roman numerals here. Number 1, restate the overarching theme of the entire selection. Number 2, explain the effectiveness of the rhetoric in the selection. I would just put 2 sentences here, and then if you have time as you're writing, if it's a timed writing or if it's for the AP exam, if you have time to develop it, develop it. If you don't, you just quickly put some ideas down here and finish it off. A lot of times, if you have done an effective job on the actual body, the closing is just summarizing what you've already said. So just remember, you have to restate what the theme is, that you get what the whole selection's about, and you have to explain the effectiveness of the rhetoric in the selection. How good of a job did the author do? How would this have affected the audience? And here's some advice as you write, just some things to consider. Number 1, please make sure you are using the strong verb sheet. I gave that to you at the beginning of the year. The more you use it now, the more it will become embedded in your vocabulary. If you wait around till later to start using it, it's going to be harder to remember how to do this, particularly for the AP exam. Second, use the tone words at the bottom of the strong verb sheet. There are so many other tone words out there, but the list that I have there for you, that's definitely a good start. And those are words that you should be using, avoiding such words as sad, happy, as tone words. I would encourage you to use smaller pieces of text incorporated with your own language. The more successful essays do not have an entire sentence in quotation marks and then an explanation. It's better to have smaller pieces of text with your own language. That is how you are going to be successful on rhetorical analysis. I should not see any entire sentences that you have copied from the text and then saying, okay, now in this sentence I do this. Please be very careful about what you're doing there. Next one, please take risks with your writing. This is not the easiest type of selection to do, type of writing to do, but you have to take some risks with it. You're not going to find out how good you can be at this unless you start saying, I'm going to do this a little bit differently, and take some chances. And finally, be patient with yourself. This is an ongoing process. These are not easy to write by any means, but if you take your time, be patient with yourself, use some of the strategies that we have here, by the time the end of the year comes for the AP exam, you'll be fine. So just enjoy yourself as you're doing it. I know it's not an exciting piece of writing for you to do, but it is something that you will be expected to do on the college level. Okay, I hope this slideshow has helped you. Good luck on your rhetorical analysis.